Enjoy a seat at the table and good company, where great conversations and meaningful discussions happen.
And good company. I'm Sarah Fiedelholtz, a conversationalist. We all know that a great dinner party isn't really about the food. It's about the people sitting around the table engaging in lively discussions. And good company creates a way to have smart and engaging conversations. I am pleased to be in the company of Andrew Gritzmaker, who is the CEO of Habitat for Humanity of Greater Fort Wayne. Welcome.
Great to be here.
So you are really almost about to celebrate your full year as the CEO.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. It's gone really fast.
Yeah. And how did you? And previously, you were the executive director of the Mad Anthony Children's Home. What made you want to get into looking at housing and all of the issues around housing and make that transition to Habitat for Humanity?
Yeah, I saw the impact that having a safe place to sleep made on the families that had sick or injured children at the hospital, and understanding like that brief moment in time and the rejuvenating effects and properties of having that safety, security, and community made in a medical crisis. I only could imagine the impact that we could have in a residential type situation and the impact we could have on local families. So I was really intrigued by the opportunity to take that next leap and make a larger impact.
And I was interested to know, your undergraduate degree was in science, public, and environmental affairs. So clearly looking at issues of the community and nonprofits was a part of your intent. But your master's is in public management. So what exactly does that mean?
Yeah, public management was a natural progression at PFW through the School of Public Policy. Now it's Education and Public Policy, or SPIA. And I actually chose that master's degree because there were a lot of different avenues that you could take. And at that time, I was really interested in healthcare administration. So I took a healthcare administration track through public management. And I started my career at Lutheran Hospital in 2007 and was there for almost 7 years, ultimately leaving as the risk management. So the reason I chose that, quite simply, is I thought I wanted to be a healthcare administrator, and that offered an opportunity to get exposure.
So let's talk a little bit about the purpose and mission of Habitat for Humanity. So it's a non-denominational, but it is a Christian housing ministry.
Absolutely.
And the idea of it is to bring both the people in the community who need housing and with volunteers and then public and private investors to help with creating housing. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The vision for Habitat, and we're a global organization, we kind of hover around the top 10 globally largest home producers, which is an incredible thing as a not-for-profit. The vision is a world where everybody has a decent place to live. Now, what that looks like is vastly different in El Salvador as opposed to Fort Wayne, or even as opposed to larger urban centers like New York or Nashville. So how we provide that ministry is very dependent on the communities in which we build. And the mission is to put God's love into action by building homes, hope, and community. So as you said very well, bringing the community together, not just from a financial standpoint, but collectively from a manpower standpoint, to really help these families make the monumental leap from that of a renter to a homeowner. And that's oversimplifying it, because it's really making that leap from poverty to sustainability and ultimately a wealth building opportunity through the equity building process.
Okay, so we're going to unpack the whole housing issue and the idea of building wealth, and we'll get to that. But I just want to outline a little bit more about how Habitat for Humanity works. So in the past 34 years in Fort Wayne, you have helped 244 families get home ownership.
Correct.
And so part of it is, one of the issues, again, we can unpack it more, but so people apply for help and assistance with the program. So the last time that you opened it up, in 30 days, you had over 750 applications. So clearly there's a real need for it.
Yes.
And then the idea is that, how does it work? So you pick the family. So take me through the process of building a home. Now I know that the way that you're building homes now has changed from when you were doing it in the development to now. So talk a little bit about that as well, and then really focus on the types of housing that you're building now.
Yeah, to touch on the application process, we're really looking for families that fall within a specific window of financial capability. And we base that on average median household income based on HUD guidelines. And we look at families based on family size that fall between 30% average median income for the area all the way up to 80% average median income. And that's
so it's really not only for those that live below the poverty line, which I think would surprise people.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. If you're an 80% AMI family, you're right on the verge of bankability.
And AMI is?
Average median income for the area. So
the median income in the area is about it's about $43,000 for gross for household income.
Yeah, and it's every year we have to do a new calculation based on HUD guidelines. So whatever the median income is for the area, we're going to take 30 to 80%, and then we're going to right now you can go to our website and you're going to see based on number of individuals in your home and how much you make if you fall within those guidelines.
Okay.
So what will happen is we have a real quick online application. I think it's like around 10 questions, and you're going to get an immediate approval or denial. And if you get denied, we're going to tell you why, and most likely it's because you make too much or too little. If you're approved, then you're invited to a more robust application process, and that's where we're going to do a lot of verifying the information that you've shared. Now, most of the families won't take that next step. There's a $15 application fee. You actually have to be a little bit more proactive. You have to pick up the packet, you have to meet with us, and then we're going to do home visits and all that stuff.
And those are all to indicate, in a way, to sort of test that somebody will pay back the mortgage.
That's
even
right.
though it's a low interest, or is it a zero interest?
Well, the verbiage is low interest, but it's zero. It's 0%.
Okay.
And so that's what we offer in exchange for the volunteer hours or sweat equity that the family is going to put into the building process. But you get through that more robust secondary application, and now you've got a pool of individuals that you may have more individuals that qualified, completed the secondary application, and now we have to rank them.
Okay.
So what we do is based on need. We have a rubric, and have you been a victim of crime? Have you been a victim of burglary, specifically homicide rates in the area, overcrowding, substandard housing conditions, and we rank these families, and what will happen is we'll get a small group of families that rise to the top with the greatest need. So they're qualified, able to repay, and have the highest need.
Okay.
Those are the families we work.
And then you pick the family.
Yes.
And then and they have to go through an education, like a financial literacy program as well, right?
Yeah, there's an educational component, around 50 hours of their total sweat equity, which currently is 250. It was as high as 400 in the past, 400 sweat equity hours. But currently 250, about 50 of those are going to be spent in the classroom. And it's not all financially related. We do offer classes on general home maintenance and repairs. So what can you expect when you don't have a landlord or someone that's going to come fix these things for you? What type of preventative maintenance should you be expecting to participate in on an annual basis through the home ownership process? So it's a really robust mix of both practical and financial.
Okay. And so before 2019, you really were focusing on, you specifically were building houses in a subdivision called Fuller's Landing. And in 5 years, you built 44 homes. But then in 2019, you sort of pivoted that to the more traditional habitat. Tell me what that means and where you're headed now.
Sure. So when you say traditional habitat building, you're referring to an infill approach, where we take vacant lots that are available to us. In Fort Wayne, there's a third party called the ACCDC, the Allen County Community Development Corporation. And they hold these properties. Maybe there was a blight there or a foreclosure or something. They wound up with these properties, and they maintain them until a third party chooses to purchase them. So a lot of our lots over the past 34 years, even before Fuller's Landing, is we would acquire these very affordable lots, and then we would build on those lots, and they would kind of be one-offs, right? So you could be spread, if you're building, our average is 7 homes a year over the past 34 years, and it's ticking up now, but you could be kind of all over the city. And that's typically the traditional habitat approach. But in 2015, we started the groundwork essentially for Fuller's Landing, and we became developer. So all the infrastructure in Fuller's Landing, getting lots ready and building those first 44 homes. And when I came on, we had completed phase 1, and phase 2 and phase 3 were undeveloped. So it was going to be another right around $2 million to put the infrastructure in and get ready for
that
builds.
was to put the sewage, the electric, they weren't like the streets, everything like that.
You got it.
Right.
And we just weren't in a position to move forward with that type of investment. So we went back to a more cost-effective approach, which is the infill. And throughout this time, we learned a lot of different things. As I shared earlier, when you're dealing with families that are 30% average median income to 80% average median income, their housing needs are vastly different, not just based on affordability, but a variety of other factors. So we started moving down this avenue of right sizing in the house to the specific family. You know, this year we built 3 homes with Jamie Lancia out in New Haven, and that's kind of that Fuller style house out there. It's 1,300 square feet, 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 2-stall garage. Those are appraising at $175,000.
And what does it cost to build something like that?
This year was a little bit strange with price of materials, as you know, supply chain, subcontractor demand was high, around 130 to 135 when you're talking development costs for that lot, and then all your sticks and bricks, your hard costs.
So, but when they're appraised at 175, so that's what the homeowner would be getting a mortgage for.
That's correct.
So there wasn't an issue there in New Haven about this whole idea of appraising for what it's built, which is a big issue in Fort Wayne. And so you've switched now to go to these lots. But in my own research about this, because I've been really interested about how this is done, there's so many factors of where the lots are and what communities to go into. And you really also have looked to really partner with other nonprofit entities or organizations that are within communities. And this was really part, I think, of something very intentional that you put forth, which was this idea of leveraging all of these entities together. And you mentioned this book, Rooting for Rivals by Tom Lynn. So talk about how you really, not only from the standpoint, typically people would expect your sponsors or the volunteer organizations that donate goods and services, but talk about how you took this idea of rooting for rivals and working together, for instance, with your work in the Mount Vernon neighborhood.
Yeah, so I came into this position in February 2019 with very little knowledge, specifically on construction and community development. So I started asking people early on, who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to sit down with? Who's doing it well? Who owns a piece of the puzzle that can shed some light on what we're trying to accomplish? And Scott Glaze is the one that said, you got to talk with Javier Mondragon. And I knew of Javier and obviously the amazing work he's done in the Mount Vernon Park community.
So Scott Glaze is the CEO of Fort Wayne Metals.
Correct.
And Javier is the pastor for the Bridge of Grace community program and church there.
That's
just
correct.
So we can qualify. And so Javier has been really doing this for 10 years. When you look at the work that he's done, like the crime rates have gone down 70% in the Mount Vernon neighborhood. And he was originally looking to just, he would buy old houses and rehab them to get them to be livable, or he was doing with getting some lots. So
that's right.
By partnering with you, that allowed him to do more homes quicker, correct?
Yeah, so the strategy, and you touched on a great thing there, the skill set that it takes to rehab and remodel a house is vastly different than one to build new. And I will tell you, it's easier to build a new house than it is to rehab a house, specifically with the habitat model, because we're dealing with unskilled volunteer labor. When you get into rehabilitation projects, you need skilled labor.
Right, but you still bring in skilled labor to do like the plumbing and wiring, and so in some ways also you've also been able to make that a learning experience, because now you're working with the Fort Wayne Community Schools, which also, and all of these parts to help the students become certified as, I guess, electricians and wiring, which also helps to defray the costs. So again, you are looking to leverage all of these different experiences and talents and bring them together.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely, the Anthus partnership is something that I want to touch on, and I'll come back to that here briefly. The partnership with Javier, it was not a new conversation, believe it or not. At one time, Javier approached Habitat, and we were all in at Fuller's Landing and didn't have the capacity to really entertain multiple build sites at that time. And so timing is everything. So Scott sets it up, Scott Glaze, Javier and I go to Nawa and we have pad thai, and 30 minutes later we have a 5-point MOU.
What's an MOU?
Like memorandum of understanding.
Okay, of working together.
Yeah,
right.
And we just both said, hey, let's keep this thing simple so we don't screw anything up and make sure that Habitat can deliver. And Javier brought the land and the support and his name and put it behind Habitat, and then we worked with MSKTD, which is an architecture firm, and they did pro bono designs for a style of home that could actually work on these long, narrow lots in the urban center.
It has a name.
It has the Bauer.
Bauer, yeah.
And that's after Trevor Bauer, this brilliant young architect who now works with Lancia Homes. And he put it together for us. But we had a very specific problem. So partnerships come into life.
Okay.
Now Habitat's got to fundraise and figure out how to build a home profitably.
Right.
And we're just like any other business. And you, so astutely hit on this earlier. Appraisal rates are something that every residential home builder battles, especially in Southeast Allen. So what typically happens is when you go into a community, maybe adjacent property values are only $30,000 to $60,000.
Right.
Your new build could cost you, if you're a traditional home builder, $120,000.
Okay.
So now you've got this $120,000 cost for something that is only valued at $60,000.
Right.
So you have to get the government or other entities to subsidize that so these residential home builders are made whole. And people do it all the time, and they leverage state and federal funding to get that done.
And that's how people get involved in why they want to do affordable housing, because they can get the difference. Okay.
That's right.
But in the case of, and that's why there's also programs for people who qualify for the first home mortgage. But in terms of really making this effective, let's take off that's not necessarily really an opportunity, that you're going to have to pay full cost.
That's right.
To build.
That's right.
So part of the problem is like when you really look at Southeast is the number of new homes, because what I understand of how they appraise is they also look at for new comps.
That's right.
So the problem is that the majority, there hasn't been, in the last 10 years, there's only been like 4 completely new builds in Southeast Fort Wayne. So how do you get the appraisal price? Because for you, I think the average cost of building this Bauer house is about $73,000 to $75,000, right?
You got it.
So to get it appraised just for that, or even a little bit above that, how do you, because when you're with blight elimination, you are picking these lots that traditionally are in between 2 existing houses. It's not like in a development where everybody on the block is new. So how do you adjust for that, and how do you get that so that it makes sense for the appraisal, so that then when you can set the mortgage price, and because you can't build a house at a loss.
That's right. And I'll tell you, and it's not a slam on the organization at all, but there have been many periods throughout our history where we were in that situation. Like Habitat would have to spend more on a house to build it than it appraised for. But we wanted to figure out, so we have this partnership, we have land that Javier is providing, we have this great young architect that's willing to work with us, and Lancia comes on, Jamie Lancia from Lancia Homes, to help direct this project, and then you're working with the appraiser. And what we did is we kept configuring, like, how much house can we build on this lot?
Right. And they're traditionally, what, 2 bedroom or 3 bedroom, 1 bath?
Yeah, that's right. Three bed, 1 bath, no garage is where we settled.
But you also made a very interesting development where you've really made sure to intentionally add like a little front porch, because that really shows, that's really a sense of building community and then having eyes on the street in the neighborhood. So you did intentionally add part of that, take that living space and add that front porch.
You're absolutely right. I mean, there's been a lot of empirical research, and Raina Bradley can tell you all about this. She's so stinking smart. But front porch communities are lower crime communities.
Right.
And actually, Raina was part of that design process.
And she's actually an architect.
She's brilliant.
Yeah.
So like the front porch component, even making sure that the front porch aspects were still open so that there were no places to hide. It was a visible front porch.
So that wouldn't be a dark place or,
You got it.
Yeah.
And so she was super helpful. So we've got like these great young architects working on it. We know about how much house we can build on the lot, and then we start working with the appraiser.
Okay.
And it's art and science and luck, but basically we had to get to a point where we got the price to where it needed to be and got the appraiser to match
Pretty close.
Very
now,
close.
The other issue would be because of the increase in material costs, right?
Yeah.
Part of the problem also in Fort Wayne is, and I think it's really a lot of it is neighborhood, but it is also zoning. You can't build a house smaller than like 900 square feet, I think. So even though the tiny house movement, and there would be opportunity for certain like seniors or to take some of these lots that maybe you couldn't build a tradition, but we can't build on those. And that would be a way to also be able to create housing that is more affordable, but you can't do that in Fort Wayne. So there's like all these elements, the zoning elements and what size the minimum house should be, and then how to appraise it. And
yeah, and this is just like one of the very first aspects of building a house. And then you move into the construction phase, which is equally complex and comprehensive, and leveraging a multitude of relationships, both fee for service as well as volunteer. And now take it a step further, families in the house, what are the holistic living aspects of this community? What access to resources do they have? Educational components, third spaces for families to actually enjoy the neighborhood. And it just goes on and on from there. So, without digressing too substantially here, we finally got the appraiser to give us an as complete appraisal of 75.6, and then that was the benchmark. And now our team had to make sure that we could build that house for less than that.
Right, and you came in at like 73, I think.
73 and some change. So it was very close. And I would say right now we've got the Bauer style. We've got 2 new ones in Mount Vernon Park going up right now, and one on Gay Street in Renaissance Point. And I know we're probably going to be over that this year.
But you're also seeing, though, in some of the appraisals that I've been looking at and stuff, you are seeing, though, some homes in Southeast pick up, and that they are actually being appraised for 100 to 120,000, which then makes it a little bit easier to build a house, that you actually could make a profit when you sell it. But the idea of wanting people, when you talk about their living in the house and the expenses, I mean, partly why you believe that it's so important for home ownership is because of this variable between rents and the cost of a mortgage. So in a house that's appraised at $76,000, right? If it's a no interest mortgage, their mortgage payment and property taxes would be maybe $250 to $300 a month.
You're probably right in that $300 a month range. You
can't the average 2-bedroom apartment in Fort Wayne, the average rent is around $795, and for a 3-bedroom, it's close to $1,100, and that's not including utilities.
Yeah.
So talk about this idea of how home ownership, not only does it give the stability to the community because the owner is literally living in it, and you don't have these owners that are even in other countries, but talk about how does the home ownership help to build the wealth in terms of paying your mortgage versus to rent?
Yeah, there's just so many benefits to home ownership, and we'll start with the finances that are associated with it. You're getting more disposable monthly income, as you shared so eloquently. The rental rates are around $600 for most of these families, but probably north of it. They're probably
they've actually, the highest rates they said since 2005 were actually in 2019, and in part they said it's because Fort Wayne housing has continued to increase. So investors from outside, like from California and other states, realize that it is good to buy property and then to rent it out. So
absolutely,
they've actually seen, and also because there isn't as much, so they can charge more, which is actually what they saw for 2019.
You're absolutely right. That's another just really great concept around housing, especially when you have landlords that don't reside in even the state of Indiana, let alone in the communities themselves. So there's a lack of vested interest, and in fact, degradation of properties. If their appraisal rates go down, they pay less taxes on those properties. So it actually incentivizes them to maybe not be as good at keeping up on the house as they probably should. To build instant equity, though, going back to your question, the difference between renting and home ownership, at 0%, your first payment is like you putting money in a piggy bank, right? So it's not going anywhere else. Yeah, you got your escrow account for your insurance and taxes, but your principal payment goes right into account. And from day one, that first payment,
you're building equity.
You're building equity. Our families could stay there for 10 years. They could sell the house, and they're going to get all their equity back, or stay there forever, right? And it's very, as you said, cost effective. If you're around $300 a month, let's add utilities back into the equation now. Our homes that we build are hyper energy efficient. So there's these HER ratings, and I don't know all the science behind it, but they basically rate how energy efficient the house is. And we always exceed minimum expectations for that. And then you have a fully furnished house. So we're going to make sure you have a washer, a dryer, a range, a microwave.
So you're going to put in all the appliances too.
That's right. Your HVAC system is high efficiency. So these families are not only just moving from a rental situation to a home ownership situation, building equity, but they're saving money now because it's an energy efficient house with all new appliances.
Right, and like Indiana, Michigan Power, if you do certain things, you can get $15 back. And if you from your, there's all these programs to incentivize people to get a more efficient toilet, and so you're doing that as well.
That's right. And now think about this: a brand new house, you got delayed maintenance. That's a brand new roof, right? So you've got
heating system,
12 years before you probably have to start thinking about something like that, maybe longer if you're keeping up on your house appropriately. So our families are saving money coming and going. Now, when we're cutting their average, in this situation, this $76,000 house situation, this family is saving half of their monthly housing expenses.
Okay.
So now we're building in a lot more resilience for the family. They can roll with the punches that life throws at us all. So car breaks down, they got the money to get it back on the road.
They say that the majority of Americans could not even come up with $400 for an emergency expenses.
Correct.
So so that's really helping them. And then it also gives them more disposable income in sense to provide better food for their children, or better after school programs, or childcare, or being able to send their child if they wanted to a parochial school, or so it
extracurricular activities, so the kids can start building their own communities and social networks. So overall, it's just a stark contrast. Now, homeownership isn't for everybody, but I would say those individuals, especially in that 30% AMI range, it is a life-changing event. And it becomes even more important through the preparation process and the financial literacy component that you touched on earlier. Now you have and can expect disposable income.
Right.
What is the proper way to manage that, to reinvest that, to save that? There's all these other steps that come and responsibilities with having a little bit more to spend.
Right. Let's not just go out and buy a new car.
That's right.
Right. But also, the other interesting thing is that you have less than 5% of people who don't meet their mortgage payments.
Obligations.
Their obligations. And so one of the things also that I thought was so interesting was the traditional way that Habitat for Humanity, you held these mortgages. And now, because you're sort of looking at this idea of impact investing, and also because you have set a pretty aggressive strategic plan that you would like to increase your production of building homes over 112% in 5 years.
Correct.
So with this idea that you want to create, your goal is by 2022 to be able to do 20 homes a year, and because of the fact that you need cash flow and liquidity, so you now created this program with First Merchants Bank.
Correct.
So talk about that, and because to me, I always thought that Habitat, you held the mortgages, but now you're really adding a banking component and really you're also getting a bank to see the value in helping people get a home and build affordable housing. So tell me how that came about.
Yeah, I'm going to tie the two things together here. We need desirable mortgages that banks want to purchase. So our default rate has to be exceptionally low. We need good paying families because no one's going to buy a mortgage that they expect someone to default on.
Right.
Now, the Habitat program in itself, was created in a way to make families successful, not to ultimately sell off this asset to be able to reinvest it. And the asset I'm speaking of is the mortgage held.
Okay.
But to make sure that our families truly do never look back from a poverty standpoint, that they have charted a new course and it is definitive and there is no changing direction.
Okay.
I would say, over the past 2 years, it's a combination of things. Yeah, it's financial literacy. Yeah, it's sweat equity. It's
Right.
skin in the game. But I think the secret sauce for us, Sarah, as I shared earlier, we never let a family spend more than 28% of their gross monthly income on
Okay.
housing.
Okay.
And national average, most will say you should be at the 30% range, but most individuals are near 40.
Yeah, no, and partly when I said at the beginning of this conversation that this whole idea of housing and affordable housing and all of the things that are surrounding it, I was amazed at this whole idea that they said that you should not spend more than 30% of your gross income. So this is before even taxes.
That's right.
On your housing, and that has to include plus utilities. But the way they came up with this 30% number was actually very arbitrary because it was from housing in 1969, and at that time it was 25%. They raised it to 30% in 1981. And the reason the government came up with that 25% figure, they didn't do any analysis. They just looked, well, that's what people are spending. Yeah. And so now people still do it by this 30%, but we have all of these additional costs that are built into, we have to pay for ourselves, like 401k, health insurance, childcare, that in the 1960s you didn't have to. So now it's even saying that even 28% is too high in some cases. So even that even puts a barrier against what makes sense for people to spend on housing.
Yeah, and in some regards, yeah, it is arbitrary, but I would say looking at our track record, so we are dealing with a group of largely unbankable individuals. So the closest comparison would be the subprime mortgage market, a higher risk pool of bankable candidates. So our families are unbankable, which should increase the level of risk associated with the underwriting portion of
And are they
mortgage.
unbankable because of the sense that they don't have savings because they can't, or they spend everything that they get, or they have high debt to income ratios?
DTI, credit history,
DTI is
debt to income ratio.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be a variety of reasons, but essentially this is like the highest risk pool that you could originate a mortgage for.
Okay.
And what we're seeing is over 9 out of 10 are successful. So what is it that makes the Habitat family so successful? And I think a large portion of it is, arbitrary or not, ensuring that they are keeping their housing costs in that below 30% threshold.
Right.
Which
is
a lot
traditionally, if you think about it, so I did the rough calculation, okay? So if based on the average income in Fort Wayne, 30% of your income on rent and utilities should be no more than $1,100, which, now this is gross median income. So this is not before taxes.
Yeah, that's right. That's not dollars in the
right.
door.
So if you think about that, though, and the average 2-bedroom is going to cost you at least around $795. If their mortgage is only $250 to $300, then you now are giving them, out of that, let's say $1,100, we're now giving them $750 that then they could put towards, because they say that you're supposed to put in this 30%. I was doing all this research about how they come up with these personal budgets.
Yeah.
So they said 8 to 10% should be no more allocated to paying off debt. So you figure that would be critical, that maybe now these families could put 10 to 15% to pay off this very high interest debt, or their student loans, or they could put more in their 401k or use it, for childcare. So you're also freeing up, it's even less than 28% based on even if you got a low interest rate mortgage, which they could never get.
Yeah.
I mean, you still are you're way below that 28%.
I agree, and not that that's the most. Well, it's one of the most significant components, but it's not the only component. Obviously, a part of the program. We've talked about the sweat equity and the education, and families that make that jump, I think, immediately recognize all the other benefits that come with home ownership, and their life improves substantially. And we know empirically that kids that grow up in owner-occupied homes have better educational outcomes, more likely to go on to post-secondary education.
Less stress.
Right. They're healthier.
But the sense of they don't know if they're going to have a home, which is clearly now what we're seeing with COVID and the idea of what's happening in terms of, the stability of even mortgages, but, for people to be able to pay their rent or their mortgages. And so the other thing that I really, when I was starting to look at this whole housing affordability issue, is this issue of eviction, which is a very big problem and creates a huge problem for people. Because prior to COVID, Fort Wayne had the 13th highest eviction rate in the U.S.
8 families a day.
Right, and that's 7.39%. And the national average, is 2.3%. Now, not only do we have the problem of, which surprised me about the evictions, but Indiana is a very landlord-friendly state. Like, you cannot withhold your rent if you are living in a home that has, there's problems with the home and the landlord doesn't fix them, or that it becomes uninhabitable. You cannot legally withhold your rent. And the other thing that amazed me about Indiana is if you are evicted, that doesn't get expunged from your record, because eviction notices in Indiana are public information. So this whole sense, if you have ever been evicted, or even if you were filed against the eviction, but then it, you resolve the issue, that stays with you. And you talk about then trying to rent or get a mortgage. I mean, I had no idea of this issue and the problem that evictions create with creating the opportunity for housing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's definitely a huge concern. I was shocked too. I read the book Evicted and then went online and saw the eviction project, and when I pulled up our stats, I was just kind of floored. I mean, even it being such a public thing, right? It's still, I don't know why it's not top of mind for more individuals. And I was even, I was almost a year into the job,
right,
when I started learning about this.
I mean, I think we're going to see more evictions, because what the other thing that when I was looking at this, especially with COVID, what people think, oh, well, the federal government, did this 120-day moratorium in March.
Yeah.
But that only covered homes that were federally financed rental units, which was only 1 in 4. And then if you were many renters, when they had that moratorium, then they had to rely on state and local moratoriums. But most of those ended in August, including Indiana's. What people don't realize is the existing moratorium that's going to be, expires at the end of the year is really from the CDC, which made it that the moratorium on eviction, because it's a public health concern if people lose their housing.
Correct.
So it wasn't like even locally we didn't do anything to support what's going to happen. And so they are predicting there's going to be a wave of evictions. So imagine in normal times when people are concerned about if they're going to be able to keep a roof over their heads versus now with COVID. And you really are, from what I can tell, you are at the mercy of the landlord and then how they evict you, and it's unbelievable. So, I mean, you talk about giving someone just that security. And I was watching and reading some of the interviews you do with some of your families. And they talk about like that sense of security, and that they're not moving every couple of months, and they can build, and the children have stability, and they get to go to the same school. And so you are building a lot more than just putting a roof over somebody's head.
Yeah, and I don't know what the cost equate to, but I'm sure it's staggering when you think about families that have housing insecurity and raise children in that situation, and the ripple effect that it has throughout the course of those children's lives. Like if they're sicker, less educated, their probability of getting out of that situation is not great. But when you think about, just from a practical not like a humanistic standpoint, Sarah, but just like a financial standpoint, that these individuals on the very basics, like ground level, if you go from renter to homeowner, now you're paying property taxes. You're paying into the community for these supportive services.
Right.
And then you take it a step further, like you were talking about, the additional disposable income. That goes right back into our economy. Now we don't have to worry about sick kids without health care. We don't have to worry about kids dropping out of school early. We can probably assume they're less likely to be incarcerated as well through that. All these other things that we're going to pay for now in a very humanistic way, or we're going to pay for later. At some point, we got to pay the bill.
Well, you also, one of the things that you also talk about is this idea that real estate is the easiest gateway to impact investing, and that partly real estate or home ownership is also able to sort of, I don't want to say normalize, but sort of the idea of the injustices and inequity.
Yeah.
So talk about how you see, especially with your work in Southeast Fort Wayne, how do you see that by creating these programs and having these opportunities for home ownership, that you are able to sort of, address in some way the inequity of building wealth in a sense?
Yeah, like I said, most of these communities in Southeast Allen are 60% rental.
At least.
So by slowly gaining ground and getting more people into a stable housing situation, a wealth building situation, and laying roots in these communities, you can kind of start changing the tide. You look at the Oxford community, and the Oxford Neighborhood Association is a very active neighborhood association, very involved.
Right.
Irick Headley, City of Fort Wayne, there's a lot of resources. There are a lot of great people that choose to live in the Oxford area, and they have been there. They have generational roots. How can we just build upon the good that's already there, right? And provide these opportunities, wealth building opportunities for people to lay down roots and then reinvest themselves. I think we really need to expedite the number of homes that we're putting out.
Well, okay, so you recognize that you had to expedite them, and what we said was you need cash flow, you need
cash.
liquidity. So this goes back to talk about the program with First Merchants Bank.
Yeah, so first you figure out how to right size the home for the family, right? And then you figure out the housing designs that you can build in the geographic areas.
Right.
You ensure that those families aren't going to default, and so you got a great product. So now you're not losing on your houses.
Right.
Families are successful.
Okay, and you've worked on the appraisal issue, so we are getting them to be, if not what it costs, but even now we're working a little better, because some of them you are seeing at $115,000 even for some of the homes that you're looking
at.
to build.
175. Just three of our homes this year went for 175, which is incredible.
Those were in the New Haven.
In New Haven.
But even in Fort Wayne, where before, like you said, you couldn't get a home for 70, but you are getting them now appraised.
Yeah, the one on Gay Street is going to be done here soon, and that will be the test, because Renaissance Point has a higher adjacent property values than anywhere else southeast.
Even Mount Vernon?
Even Mount Vernon.
Because the areas that you're focusing on in Southeast are Renaissance, Oxford, and Mount Vernon. That's sort of where you've sort of allocated.
That's correct.
Okay, but let's talk about, tell me how this First Merchant.
So you're kind of building, right? And we just looked at our mortgage portfolio, and when I started, we had like $7 million.
Right.
In assets held, and
that's just here.
That's just here.
That's what you hold on your books.
We did when I started.
Right, when you started, but now.
Yes, and there's a lot more to this story. When I first started, we had our capital campaign, the Restore on Lima Road.
Right.
We had about $2.6 million that we had to satisfy on that construction line of credit. So we implemented the strategy with First Merchants Bank. We brought them in. We laid out our strategic plan and said, we're trying to grow our production. We got this huge debt load right now. we feel that we can leverage these $7 million worth of mortgages in an innovative way. Other habitats around the country have sold mortgages, but usually it's just a one-off. You got a capital need, you sell. But Habitat International actually warns, like, you don't want to get in the habit of selling these because that's kind of your lifeblood. That's your revenue that you can count on. But when you've got profitable houses and you've got sustainable homeowners, now you've got this product that you can sell, and you can make sure that you're not cutting yourself off in any way. So
and
anyway,
also that you've identified of the mortgages which ones are the most profitable ones. Okay.
That's right. And so we sat down and we did this first mortgage sale with First Merchants Bank, became debt-free as a facility, and then we laid out a plan for how we are going to serve, the families that are 80% and build as much house as they can afford, while keeping it at that 28%.
Right.
And then every bit of profit we get from selling that mortgage to the bank, which
you're reinvesting in
low-income census tract housing. Right. So it's kind of this piston effect.
So although you would think First Merchant is doing this from a philanthropic, it's really not. It really is a very smart business that they can make money. And then there's also this thing where it's their community rating.
Community Reinvestment
Act.
Yeah,
so what is that? That gives them a higher ranking for what?
Yeah, so the federal government has stipulations for lending in geographic areas to lower income individuals. And I'm no CRA expert, but banks are incentivized to make investments in communities that historically had been redlined from the banking process. So I do want to make one point. It is still, I feel, although there are a lot of benefits to First Merchants Bank, extremely philanthropic at its core.
No, absolutely. But it's not like they're doing this at a loss to themselves or saying, we're doing this to give back to the community. There's benefits for them, but
that's
taking the risk, absolutely. Yeah. But it really, and that's about the partnership. But so let's just talk about this idea that what it allowed you to do was it would allow you to get access to capital, because traditionally you would have to wait till someone paid off their 30-year mortgage to get the money, and it's zero interest, so you're not even making any money.
That's correct.
So the idea was that it was allowing you to be able, because you see this need that you need to figure out how to build more houses at a faster rate. So now it allowed you though, so take me through the numbers, because you're saying that your build budget for to do 105 new homes is about $2.9 million. Okay, so what I didn't understand was this about how it becomes that the idea that it's the investment amount of $28,000 per home. That I didn't understand where that comes into I understand how you can get more money faster and then you can build more houses, but how do you get the benefit of the investment from working with like a First Merchants? Yeah,
so to go back to that relationship, we at that time consolidated 5 banking partners. They were all great, so treasury management, investment accounts, debt holdings. When we satisfied the debt, we consolidated everything down to one banking partner, and we put out RFPs. We met with 5 banks. They were all competitive. A lot of banks locally wanted to work with us.
Right, so you're putting all of your holdings, because the other interesting thing is the amount of revenue that the Restore generates is like 1.7 million.
Correct.
Which is makes 1/3 of your overall budget.
Yes.
So you put everything for, not only for your mortgages, but everything for Habitat into to First Merchant and say, we're going to be here as our banking partner.
That's right.
Okay.
We wanted to, simplify things on our end, especially if we're getting into more complex financing strategies. We needed to be hyper-focused and have one point of reference.
Okay.
And that point of reference was First Merchants Bank. Their team and their diversity and their skill set complemented our aggressive strategy that was going to require constant innovation. So we looked for a banking partner that not only could help us put this play into motion and would be large enough to have the appetite to purchase year over year,
right,
but would be able to help us get over some hurdles and roadblocks along the way.
And it also enables, really in a sense, because when you were holding the mortgages, it didn't help the homeowner build their their credit scores, right? I mean, or
It's all reported, yeah.
but here now, if now they've got a relationship with the bank, so now they can get, maybe they can refinance their debt, or they can now start having a savings account or create a, 529 account for their kids' education. So it also gives the homeowner, who you said, a lot of them, they're not bankable, to really start to build a relationship that makes them bankable, but doesn't, but you still have that entry point where if they really went to the bank to get this mortgage, they would have never been able to get it. So sort of still having Habitat as the entry and then introducing it to the bank is still really invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. So part of this banking relationship too is a lot of people don't realize that Habitat is a construction company, residential construction company, but we're also a bank. So we do all the underwriting and mortgage origination at the time of close, which we have qualified loan originators. I'm one of them. But let's say in our best year, right, over the past 34, we're doing 7 a year. It's really hard to get great at underwriting a mortgage origination when you're doing 7 a year, as opposed to a bank that's doing 10, 20, 30, whatever in a month, a week, what have you, especially in our market now. So we saw an opportunity to realign some of the aspects that we were doing in-house with a strong banking partner. So they manage and service all of our mortgages. So after we still do origination in-house, then the bank is actually going to manage payment processing and escrow for us. Step 2, and we're working with them right now, this is one of those hurdles, to growing and scaling. We don't want the liability of creating mortgages. So we're working with their team right now to see if they can do zero-sum mortgage origination in-house, or 0%. And other banking partners have done this with Habitat, like that.
So is this being done at Habitats across the country?
Well, not across the country, and I think it has to be very specific organization and community to make a partnership like this work. So
are other Habitats looking at using Fort Wayne as the laboratory to see how you're doing it?
I don't know if I would go that far. I mean, I think we have the potential to be that organization in the future. We spend a lot of time looking at our neighbors, and I'll digress here just momentarily. First Source Bank does mortgage origination for St. Joe County and South Bend. So we know it's possible. We just have to figure it out and make sure that from a legal standpoint, all of our bases are covered. When you talk about our production, we looked at Des Moines, Iowa.
You said Des Moines, Iowa is similar to us.
Same size market, slightly average higher median income. They're doing 20, 25 homes a year. So that's where that 20 number came from. We didn't pluck it out of thin air. We said someone that's basically in Fort Wayne, like similar market, is doing this, so we know it can be done.
Right.
So now we're going to learn everything we can from them and see what we can do here to scale to that 20 threshold. So anyway, back to the FMB partnership. So it was a really holistic, comprehensive partnership with eyes towards the future. We laid out our strategy. They said, yeah, we're going to buy into this. We like what you're doing, and it's been great. And we're just getting started. You had talked about the $2.8 million for 105 homes.
Yeah.
So that was kind of our first attempt to put on paper what this mortgage selling strategy could look like.
Okay.
So we leveraged Fuller's Landing. We said, what if we go to Fuller's Landing and we develop the next 67 lots?
Oh, those are the ones that you've decided that you weren't going to do because they weren't ready. Okay.
Yeah, from a financial standpoint in February 2019.
So that's where this 2.9,
okay. So hypothetically, you walk through that model, you're going to spend $2 million. And you're going to develop 67 lots, and they're ready for sticks and bricks, right? That $900,000 is roughly the cost when we go back and we look at the last 4 homes that we built leading up to the 44th home in Fuller's Landing, about $90,000 for sticks and bricks. So you're talking about $30,000 to get the lot ready, and then you put a $90,000 product on it.
Right.
Now you've got a product that you are all in $120,000. Our last 4 homes in Fuller's Landing all appraised for $160,000.
Right. So that's a very bankable mortgage.
That's a bankable mortgage. So you write the note on that, and then you go to your banking partner and say, I'm ready to sell these mortgages. It took $120,000 to build it. The house is valued at $160,000. Now let's talk about that $40,000. How do we unlock it? what do you guys need and where do we need to be at?
And that's where that 28,000 from you,
That's
and then
it.
they unlock the remaining.
So yeah, you walk through that, you build this house that is $160,000 asset and you sell it to the bank. And the bank's not going to pay dollar for dollar.
Right.
Based on market conditions, and in that model we said, what do we need to keep the cycle going for the next house? We need at least 75 cents on the dollar. So we go to the bank and we say, we're going to sell this mortgage to you. You're going to get a 25% discount.
Right.
And they say, great, we love it, give us the mortgage.
And this also creates sort of a whole platform for Habitat for that you're not only relying on donations and grants, because that's where the majority of your budget comes from, except for Restore, is really on. So it also gives you that stability to know that you can do this year after year. It's not that you're going to have a fluctuation of 20 houses one year and 5 houses another. And
That's right.
And what really though amazes me, and I think that, yes, we got into the weeds with the numbers, but is that Habitat for Humanity is so much more about than building a house.
That's right.
And you're looking at all of the issues around housing and affordability and building wealth, and even with the issues of eviction and rents, and to really take it. It's what I wanted to get across to people is it's not just about, it's great that you build the homes and you give the homes to people to live in, but you are doing so much more. And I think that this program with First Merger is really a true testament to you, and you being open, maybe because you came in not knowing as much, but really saying and setting the mission of, we are going to do impact investing, and we are going to figure out how to be investing not only in our families, but in the community and in the housing system. So I think that that's a real testament to you, and maybe sometimes it is what what you don't know can't hurt you. So you just sort of are very much and sort of what I think what when Jimmy Carter created Habitats, roll up your sleeves and figure out how to get it done. And so you're really going so much more beyond that traditional of getting the lot and the community participating, but really figuring out and sort of looking at these very significant issues. And that's what amazed me when I started to look at this and started realizing these issues with housing is so much more than just giving them a home to live in. I mean, and it's unbelievable. So it's a real testament to you. And I would say that you've been working very hard to earn your 2 years of CEO.
No, I mean, thank you. I appreciate that. And our team at Habitat, and it starts at the board level. But obviously, the colleagues I get to work with every single day, Kelly Gerber and Jeremy McClish and Victoria McAllister, all these individuals are dedicated to being innovative enough to make the difference that I think we can make, and the difference that I think every not-for-profit wants to make.
Right.
So part of, as you talked about, the sustainability aspects of Habitat, we would really love to be 100% self-sufficient. Now, we don't talk about it all the time, but part of our strategy to grow production and build profitably and do all these things to make sure that we're not just a solid not-for-profit, but we're a solid business.
Right.
And when we do that, we can direct our funds and deploy them more efficiently than ever before. I am so thankful that we live in a generous community. Our foundations are great. Our corporate donors are incredible. Our individuals, how much giving comes through the door. I'm often overwhelmed at the generosity and the outpouring of support. And I think the greatest gift I can give in return is to need less and less of that every single year. That's my job. And if I can get us to that point of sustainability, and more resources are then available to allocate to other missions, other not-for-profits that may not be as fortunate as us to have a diverse revenue stream, that we can really start making some huge changes, not just in housing, but in our community.
But that goes back to your whole idea of rivals coming together and working together and collaborating and saying that, okay, so we have this money, but we don't necessarily need it. So now let's not get it, but let's take it and give it to training or education or things like that. So it's a real testament, and I think that the idea that I think that is the goal, that to really think of having a entity that is profitable and is a business, and you're really seeing that with your Restore
Yes.
business. So, I mean, it's a testament to you and your team. And at the end of each And Good Company program, I ask guests the same 12 questions that French novelist Marcel Proust popularized from a Victorian parlor game. What is your favorite word?
My favorite word. Oh, thoughtful.
What is your least favorite word?
Oh, geez. That's a really good question, Sarah. I don't know if I have a least favorite word.
Okay, what's the one you don't want to hear from donors or the bank?
The same word, all of us. No.
Okay.
Right.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Oh, being around passionate people, and it doesn't matter if I'm on fire for the same things they are. I just love being around people that are excited about what they're doing.
What turns you off creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Ooh, gosh. Putting me in a box. I need room to move. So the less guardrails, the better.
Well, we can see that when we take the guardrails off of Habitat, what you're doing. What sound or noise do you love?
Oh, sound or noise? I'm going to throw this out to Jennifer Jordan, my wife's voice. I know that's
Okay.
a layup, but that's going to earn me some points.
I think you get a lot of points there from what I could tell. What sound or noise do you hate?
Can I say no again?
Yes, you may.
All right.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
I would love to be the race director for the Boston Marathon.
Right, because you're a big marathon, and you actually did a huge cross-country race to raise money when you were at Mad Anthony. Are you still a big runner?
Yeah, I have less time to do it, but I still love it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What profession would you not like to do?
Oh gosh, I worked in restaurants a lot, and I really appreciate the service industry. That's probably not an area that I'd like to go back to.
Okay. What do you consider your greatest achievement?
My greatest achievement, oh gosh, I would say the biking across America was probably the single hardest thing I've ever done, and it broke me in more ways than one.
And that was a fundraiser, right?
Yeah, it was a fundraiser for the Children's Hope
And
House.
how much did you raise?
30,000. I biked from Oregon to Virginia. It was 4,200 miles and got it done in 32 days. So you go over the Rockies and the Appalachian Range.
I want to at some point have a conversation of how this whole idea of this came about, but that'll be for another time. Who, living or dead, would you most like to have a conversation with?
Oh gosh, I know this probably sounds cliche as well, but Abe Lincoln. I just think, like, when you think about all the turmoil and challenges that we face right now, and you look back at the Civil War and the grace and the courage and the strength and determination from a leader standpoint, that would be an interesting conversation.
How would you like to die?
Ooh, peacefully.
Okay.
But if that's not the case, doing something that I'm passionate about.
So running. Right.
Running,
Okay.
yeah, and that could be. That
Okay.
could be.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Job well done.
Well, you certainly are doing a job well done, and I do hope that you'll come back, because we haven't even really unpacked so much of the issues with housing, and also with looking at blight elimination and how to build houses within these empty lots within these neighborhoods. And I think there's more to that part of the conversation that I would like to have. So I hope you will come back.
Yes, and if I can share, I just want to thank you for your passion and commitment to this community and bringing on such interesting individuals and having important conversations.
Well, thank you. And on that note, please join me next time when you can again enjoy a seat at the table for great conversation and good company.